This is After the Fire, a series about history after the events. Each season follows the long relationship between two worlds. Every empire believes the world can be drawn, measured, named, divided, and fixed into place. Maps promise control. They suggest that space can be mastered if only it is properly described. But for most of history, the space between Iran and India refused this ambition. It remained legible not through lines, but through movement. Long before borders existed, space was something people lived inside, not something they crossed. If this speaks to you, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and tell us what you think. Chapter 1: Space Before It Was Owned. For centuries, the lands stretching from the Iranian Plateau toward the Indus Basin were not understood as territories with edges. They were understood as routes, gradients, and zones of passage. In Iranian traditions, space unfolded outward from a moral center. Order weakened with distance, not because another world began, but because certainty faded. The farther one moved from the center, the more the world became ambiguous rather than hostile. There was no clear edge where Iran ended. In the Indian world, geography followed a different but equally non-linear logic. Rivers structured memory and ritual. Mountains anchored myth. Sacred regions emerged through repetition, pilgrimage, and story. Space mattered because it was experienced again and again, not because it was enclosed. Between these worlds lay regions such as Bactria, Arachosia, Gandhara, and the Indus Basin. These places were not borders. They were connective tissue. Languages overlapped. Religious practices blended. Authority shifted with circumstance. Power moved through these spaces because it had no alternative. It followed caravan routes, river valleys, and mountain passes. Control was negotiated, temporary, and often shared. The idea that space could be fully owned had not yet taken hold. This way of understanding the world endured because it worked. Chapter 2: Alexander and the moment the map broke. The late 4th century BCE brought a dramatic challenge to this order. Alexander's campaign was not only a military project, it was an epistemic one. Greek chroniclers accompanying the army attempted to record distances, name rivers, classify peoples, and impose coherence on the world as it was encountered. Crossing the Iranian plateau, this approach appeared successful. Cities could be captured, roads could be measured, resistance could be overcome. Space behaved as expected. India did not. Beyond the Indus, Greek sources struggle. They describe a land that seemed endlessly expansive, internally diverse, and resistant to classification. Rivers multiplied. Political authority did not align neatly with geography. Power appeared fragmented, layered, and situational. At the Beas River in 326 BCE, Alexander's army refused to march further east. This moment is often framed as mutiny or exhaustion, but it reveals something deeper. The space ahead no longer fit the mental map that sustained conquest. The world extended beyond what could be ordered. This was not simply the limit of empire, it was the limit of mapping. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his successors inherited territories they could not fully conceptualize. Seleucid authority stabilized west of the Indus. In the east, the Mauryan Empire consolidated power according to a different logic. The attempt to unify space under a single imperial vision collapsed quietly. The world had pushed back. Chapter 3: Mapping as understanding, not possession. Centuries later, a radically different approach to space emerged. In the early 11th century, the scholar Al-Biruni travelled into the Indian world during the period of Ghaznavid expansion. He arrived with an empire, but he did not write for it. His work represents one of the most remarkable attempts in pre-modern history to describe another civilization without reducing it to conquest. Al-Biruni studied Indian calendars, astronomy, cosmology, geography, and social practices with extraordinary care. He learned Sanskrit. He compared systems rather than ranking them. Where earlier imperial mapping sought dominance, his work sought comprehension. This was mapping as translation. Yet this approach remained fragile. It depended on intellectual humility and patience. It did not lend itself easily to bureaucratic power. When early modern and colonial powers later turned their attention to the same regions, they returned to a different logic. British surveys and strategic cartography imposed precise lines on landscapes that had long functioned as zones. Movement became disorder. Ambiguity became error. Routes hardened into borders. Zones became edges. Space was no longer lived, it was owned. The older relational geographies collapsed under the weight of precision. Maps do not simply describe the world, they create it. For centuries, Iran and India were connected without being enclosed. They understood space as movement, negotiation, and passage. Only when power demanded certainty did borders begin to harden. After the fire of empire, what remains are the consequences of those choices. Lines drawn too sharply over worlds that once refused to be fixed. And beneath those lines, the quiet memory of a time when knowing how to move mattered more than knowing where you were. Stay with us, like, subscribe, and tell us what you think.